To the Abandoned Sacred Beast is a series from Studio Mappa that seems to have went under a lot of people's radar, but I honestly think deserves much more respect than it currently gets. Now on the surface you'll see an average visual production with a Monster of the Week formula to go alongside it. But once you witness how this series develops and explores its characters rather than thinking it's just a weekly beast fighting show, what you'll quickly notice is how it's a post-war character drama story with an emphasis put on character development and its fair share of humanity. The story follows our two lead characters, Hank and Nancy. Hank is a modified super soldier that was created among a group of characters to turn the tides of a war that they were destined to lose. Each had the ability to transform into a godlike being the other humans can't handle, especially when they work together, which is why the losing side won so quickly after their secret weapon was unleashed. After the war was won, it was discovered that these soldiers, they're gonna lose themselves to their genetically engineered powers and won't be able to turn back to being a normal human, meaning their animal lust will drive them to be worse than any war in the future given enough time, and after seeing one of their own already lose himself. It wasn't just one rogue soldier, they all will suffer this exact same fate. So their creator, which unfortunately was Hank's love interest, tries to kill them and herself as punishment to fix this mess that she created. That is until another incarnate soldier, Kane, stops her and Hank, which then triggers Hank for revenge after thinking his love was murdered and his former friend unleashed hell upon the world. Hank's ultimate goal is to fulfill the pact that they all made after seeing one of their own brutally killed. Should any of them lose themselves, they will make sure one of their own is the one to pull the trigger. A heartbroken and rage-filled Hank has his eyes set on taking out the Incarnate Squad because as their captain he feels it's his duty to take on the pain upon himself. But along the way he kills Nancy's father, which sets Nancy on her own path. One to figure out why this man had to kill her father, but also his other comrades. Should the answer be one she doesn't agree with, she has her eyes set on ending Hank's life. But on the other hand, maybe the answer will help her grow up in this new world that she really never knew about. What makes this tale truly special is the relationship between these two characters, but also the incarnates themselves. Most stories that have a weekly formula of fighting a monster to move on to the next allow for the emotional weight of the death to be associated with the side character of that week, generally meaning most of the incarnates Hank would go up against in this series wouldn't actually have a personal connection to him, but rather others that we just met that week, which honestly would make for a show that doesn't rope in the viewer because of a lack of personal connection that these others seemingly have. Where with Hank, he is their captain. The first episode gets us on board with all of his peers before they start losing themselves to their beast abilities. So as Hank wanders the world hunting down his friends, when we see a seemingly cold and ruthless stare at face value, we know behind that glare is a man crying on the inside, because we had a chance to see who they were before this moment, so we know that they are humans. But they are just simply cursed. His friends, his family, what they've become and what he is becoming to save them is something that hurts with every face we meet. The weight to the battles or even simple sequences of a man talking to a monstrous form feels completely genuine and surprisingly human. All the series does is slightly change the format that most animes such as these would aim for, but in result allows for a weekly hunting session to feel emotionally gripping. It's not as if these are monsters in the typical sense with how you might want to view them. They are tossed away soldiers with nowhere left to go. They were genetically altered in the most brutal way, told they were heroes and they're needed, to then be called monsters when they were no longer important, so the heroes of the battlefield now are considered demons and a liability. That simply isn't fair. PTSD after a war is very common, but for them it's even worse than your average soldier. As they lose themselves more to their second form, the more fear takes hold and sanity is non-existent. Characters who are afraid all their life were taught by Hank to take that fear and use it to help people, so others won't be hurt. Meaning once they are locked in their beast form, that old fear causes them to overreact and build a fortress to protect against a non-existent foe, which in result causes a town to fear for their lives as their way of life is completely destroyed. A man who joined the army to help a family and village now needs money, so he'll tell anyone traveling by to give them goods. If they don't, he kills them because he thinks he's doing a good thing, not seeing the error in his ways. You can see how their kindness turns to evil without even wanting to blame them. Every single soldier has core characteristics associated with them that help to define them during this war, both strengths and weaknesses, with a desire to win for someone or something. So when the animal urges take hold of them, all that's left is a narrow-minded view that clouds their visions, making them a threat to everyone, even those they might want to protect, making Kane's job of manipulating them an easy task as he sets out to conquer the world where he can live as a king and not be hunted as a monster. We quickly see and take notice to these facts, but for Nancy, someone new to this world, it takes her time to recognize who and what Hank really is. But when she reaches that realization, the payoff is oh so sweet. Nancy is the kind of character many, myself included, would want to write off at the beginning. But when you stick with her character, you feel rewarded with how she develops. A girl who lost her father when a war pulled him into it. He returned as a dragon, to which she accepted as he still seemed human. Then she meets a man who blows his brains out and crushes her world without a moment's notice. Her desire for revenge feels justified and makes complete sense. She isn't capable of killing this man. She tried and failed. The only conclusion she comes up with is to tag along and hopefully find a way to either end his life or see things through his perspective and give her father's death hopefully meaning. This is the daughter to one of Hank's best friends. He can't and won't hurt her. So when the time comes, he'll cut her loose, but for that time being, he just accepts her walking with him. But quickly, but at a steady enough pace, the way her eyes open up to the truth around them is one of the best parts of the series. With how she gets incorporated into these action sequences feels rewarding, especially with the help of Liza, a partner in crime for Hank. At an early enough stage, she recognizes Hank isn't some monster, but still heavily disagrees with his desire to shoot first and ask questions later. But her motive to want to try and work with the Incarnates is a balance someone like Hank desperately needed. He felt like a monster who had to kill his friends, but with every step of their journey, Nancy shows him sides he normally would miss. To which there actually comes a point where Nancy's mindset was actually correct and one of the Incarnates didn't have to be put down. That is, until humans got in her way, making it feel as if her words weren't hollow all this time. Nancy doesn't fit in this world at the start, but by the end of the anime, she naturally does. She needed answers and she gets them. Once she recognizes why Hank has to end his comrades' lives, she understands and agrees to this mindset, while sticking by his side to the bitter end. Once the two's relationship came full circle, I was fine with however this series wanted to end. Quickly, the anime makes your focus on the two's relationship, meaning once they form a bond that gives Hank the connection he once had before the war ended, and Nancy fills that hole that her father left her, you feel as if wherever this post-war tale wanted to go was acceptable, as you knew at the end of the day the two would end up where they needed to be. The story ends up being larger than just killing soldiers. Another war starts to brew, and while that side of the conflict did help to keep episodes fresh with an extra layer of tension, the aspect that glued this entire package together was how Hank and Nancy continued to grow. While at points, Hank emotionally broke to the point it was unclear whether he would be able to rise back up. All this series really does to set itself apart is move pieces slightly around, giving the monsters we fight a direct connection to our lead characters, keeping the cast morally gray, as on one hand you see soldiers thrown into the garbage once their use was up, but then again on the other hand you see a nuclear bomb ready to detonate. The slightest alterations to the formula that we're so used to helps to create an anime that doesn't come across as some monster of the week formula, but rather a post-war character drama where the preferable end result isn't an easy to swallow answer. Outside of the central duo and Incarnates, you can look at characters such as Claude, brother to Kane, as staying pretty one note with a desire for revenge, Liza, a sexually in-your-face girl who helps to be the bridge for Nancy to cross over to the new world she's trying to reach. And sure, by themselves, among others, they aren't anything extraordinary, but I think having the added layer of military personnel helped to either give a fun or serious contrast to the central duo, while continuing to distinguish itself as being more than just a weekly monster hunting show. As when the series really gets going, it's no longer just Hank hunting down these beasts. He himself, among the remaining Incarnates, start to be hunted from what would appear to be the just side, as they all aim to take out Kane and his master plan. Outside of Hank and Nancy, at multiple points I see elements that could be described as one note, but with how they wrapped up the central duo, it surprisingly never bothered me. Overall, this anime feels conflicting in the best possible sense by taking a story with soldiers leaving the battlefield and how their mentalities snap, both due to the battlefield and their powers really shaking them up. It allows for this series to stand tall as something worth your time and not just a bland series of the season, like some people might want to pass it off as. Visually, this series won't blow many people away, and it's completely fair to call it an average production. Half an episode will have medium zoomed in shots where it's difficult to properly detail and fill in areas like faces, so we get plenty of shots that look like this as characters chit-chat. Up close and personal, the character models rarely are inconsistent, and when animation is present for action, it looks smooth overall. I especially love the incarnate combat, where you get to see beasts of all shapes and sizes move with a unique flow to add on to their destructive aura. Our lead moves like a wild animal, but when we see an ogre to a dragon, it feels as if everyone has distinct movements, and no one just feels like a copied and paste piece of animation, which their distinct character designs also add on to this unique flair. The incarnate squad has gear that reminded me of Attack on Titan with its maneuver gear that visually looked silly at times, but the amount of ways this gear was able to incorporate itself into a fight was pretty awesome. I mean, they can go from skiing to burning an incarnate to mowing it down to blowing it up. It was just simply badass, I have to say. Each action sequence has about half of a battle feeling smoothly animated, with the other kind of freeze framing shots to then cut away to make it look like something big actually happened. This is why I say it's completely fair to call it average, as this type of animation design that the anime went for is kind of what we always knew and sort of hated within the past. It doesn't distract me or blow me away more often than not, but due to the gritty tone this series has going for it, the rougher around the edges look sort of adds on to the show more than it hinders it. Is when I look at these beasts or wounded soldiers, the dirty aesthetic lends itself to make up for visual shortcomings. At least, that's what I found. I also really appreciate how unique most of these characters look. Hank, he kind of feels like anime's version of Wolverine, with each of the focal characters having fairly distinct features that allows for their personalities to define them rather than their wardrobe. I'm quite used to a character like Liza being a majority of the characters in a series like this, where you look at said character and it explains who they are. But from Nancy to Hank to Claude, they all feel like people, and their true characters take a while to actually understand, which is a nice added bonus. The sound direction to this anime is one of the standouts in terms of its production. I mean, when you listen to the opening and ending tracks, you know what you're getting into. Greatness. The OST across the board really meshed in well with the story and characters at play. When it needed to rock out, it did so while getting you pumped up, but overall it had a unique way of slowing things down and keeping it emotionally gripping, so it never felt as if an episode was awesome because look at the fighting, but rather how depressing it was to see what the purpose of this action actually was. I especially enjoyed the sound effects to the incarnates themselves, and depending on the size of the beast, you felt as if there was enough attention to detail put into it to make sure that the visual design didn't fall flat on its face, as the sound direction made sure you buy into the monstrous scenes at hand, as you're listening to a giant trample the earth. But the voice actors of the incarnates and Nancy had to have stolen the show by far. Nancy's character has her writing to thank for not feeling like a hindrance to the series overall, but I definitely feel the need to compliment her actor. The transition from child innocence to mature soldier happens fairly quickly, but a big reason I bought into it so much was the emotion from her dialogue, helped obviously by the script to ease the viewer into her development. She can be cute and funny, but also emotionally gripping. It can be noticeable or quite hard to pick up on, but the mannerisms to her voice really steal the show at multiple points and hooks you without much struggle, with Hank and the other incarnates matching this tragic tale oh so well. Hank gives you off this cold demeanor, at the start at least, but when he gets going and has to show raw emotions, his actor goes in hard. And it's not just the animation that gets this raw rage and sorrow across, it's the man behind his words, with the entire cast of the incarnates feeling like caged-in animals to quickly become unfortunate victims when their time has come to an end. It's the kind of acting to help sell everyone as humans, even though we're staring at mythological creatures. In a lot of ways, To the Mansacred Beast looks and feels like the same series we've seen a dozen times over, but only when you really watch it do you take notice to how it slightly sets itself apart from the crowd, which in result lets it stand tall as its own series. It's far from perfect. The pacing can be iffy at times, with the overall lackluster production with the other half of the time. But watching this cast grow and develop with the emotional stress of a past war and a new war on the horizon, it really feels like a polished series where it counts. the characters. If we're going to follow a cast of characters dealing with the aftermath of a war, the most important area to nail has to be its characters, which thankfully it does an A+ job at more often than not. It's a series I could easily watch 36 episodes of with ease, but I just as easily could watch 12 and feel satisfied with the adventure overall, because for me the aspect that kept me hooked for 3 months straight was the growing bond between Hank and Nancy, which was handled phenomenally. There's more to explore with this anime for sure, don't get me wrong, but at the very least, the core area they needed to conclude was handled with grace. So I award this anime my seal of approval with a very strong recommendation to check it out if you haven't already. It's much more than just a Monster of the Week formula, trust me. But hey, that's just my opinion on To the Abandoned Sacred Beast. If you have your own, be sure to let me know yours down in the comment section below. Always remember to leave a like if you did enjoy, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't been new around here. Now lastly, there is my Patreon for those who want to go the extra mile and help support what I do around here even more, that is if you so wish. So until next time everyone, please take care, and have a good one.